Alistair, for God's sake, are you going to let the son of a janitor ruin a billion-dollar deal? Marcus Thorne's voice was sharp as a razor, slicing through the silence of Finch Global's underground garage. Its echo curled around the concrete ceiling, bouncing back as if even the walls wanted to witness the humiliation he had just hurled. Cold, white LED lights poured down, turning the space into a frozen stage. At its center stood a jet-black Maybach S-Class, polished to a mirror so pristine it reflected even the dust in the air. And within that reflection a paradox, a black boy, 12 years old, thin, sneakers torn at the toes, clothes faded from wear, Leo Washington. Against the steel gleam of the Maybach, the boy looked like a crack on an immaculate wall. At that crack drew the eye more than the $1,000 sheen of the paint. Marcus stepped forward, Italian Oxford shoes striking the floor with the dry rhythm of power. He glanced down at the boy, as if at a stray piece of dirt clinging to his perfectly pressed suit, smile thin as a razor blade, curled with contempt and with the certainty that the order of this world would never be disrupted. The strong rule. The weak stay silent. Alistair Finch stood beside the car, hand already on the chrome-plated handle. At 55, he was the embodiment of self-made power, an empire built from nothing, now worth tens of billions. Every minute in his schedule was measured in millions. Yet now he found himself pausing because of a child's eyes. They did not tremble. They did not plead. They lacked the familiar fear he saw in employees, rivals, even those who addressed him as Mr. Finch. Instead, they burned with urgency, like a flame fighting to pierce the ice in his chest. They planted. "Something I saw them, sir, under your car." The words came out broken, breathless, but each fell onto the concrete floor like stones shattering a still pond. Leo didn't just speak, lunged forward, slipping on the polished floor, his small hands slamming against the Maybach's door. A faint smear of sweat marked the flawless paint, a poor man's fingerprint against a gilded world. It was unthinkable, violating the sacred perimeter of power. Security in black suits rushed in like unleashed hounds. But Leo didn't blink, his gaze locked on Alistair's. Behind him, Serafina Washington ran, heart pounding. A black woman. A 38, she had spent 15 years scrubbing this tower in silence. Golden rule, to be invisible. Mop in hand, cheap shoes on her feet, eyes cast down everything so no one would remember she existed. And now, her son had shattered that rule, as if throwing a stone through bulletproof glass. "Leo, what are you doing?" "Please, Mr. Finch, he's just a child. Please." Her voice cracked, torn between shame and terror. She wasn't just afraid of losing her job. She feared this world would crush her son like an unworthy stain. Marcus chuckled, a dry cutting sound. A child with a wild imagination. "Alistair, we don't have time for cheap theatrics." His words slid smoothly, but carried venom, meant to reduce Leo's act to a farce, to snuff it out before it sparked. But Alistair Finch, who had survived ruthless deals, backstabbing boardrooms, nights on the edge of bankruptcy, recognized something Marcus didn't. There is a difference between a lie and a desperate truth. And he had just heard truth trembling. In a boy's voice, Marcus's eyes still gleamed with disdain.
"Believe eyes, Lear."
Resolute, reflected something Alistair had long buried. The primal instinct to survive. He let go of the car door. That small gesture froze the garage. Guards stopped mid-stride, pulled tight by an invisible cord. Alistair straightened, the bearing of a king delivering judgment. His voice rang out, glacial, leaving no room for dissent. "No one touches the car. Lock down the entire garage. Now." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Marcus blinked, momentarily thrown off, then forced a thin smile back onto his lips. But the ground had slipped from under him. An invisible child had cracked the wall of power he believed unbreakable. Serafina clutched Leo close, but her trembling no longer came from fear. She didn't understand why, but in that moment she felt something had changed forever. And Alistair Finch, beneath the sterile lead glare, for the first time in years, didn't hear the ticking of $1 million watch, didn't think of balance sheets, heard only the echo of one phrase, "I saw them." That echo struck his chest like a hammer against ice, and a fracture had begun to spread. The steel door of the security room shut behind them. Its metallic clang echoing like the final punctuation of a silent play that had lasted 15 years. The place was sterile and cold, the smell of metal and ozone mingling together as if they had stepped into the artificial heart chamber of a giant beast. Alistair Finch sat down in a black leather swivel chair, his face carved in marble. No more Marcus's mocking laughter, no more heels tapping the rhythm of power-only silence, suffocating. In front of him sat two people who should never have had the right to be here, a night shift janitor and her frail young son. Leo sat upright, both hands clinging to the hem of his worn shirt, eyes never leaving Alistair. In that gaze was a strange mixture, the fear of a child, but also something Alistair did not expect in yielding resolve. "Boy," Alistair's voice rasped, rough as though dragged from a 10-hour board meeting. "Say it again, every detail. Don't leave anything out." Leo swallowed hard, then began to recount. Not with the fragmented stutters of a child's story, but with strokes etched deep into memory. "There were two men," he said. One had a spiderweb tattoo on his wrist. Only saw it when his shirt sleeve slipped as he bent down. The other had a smell, a chemical smell. Like my school's lab, but stronger, sharper.
Alistair.
Tilted his head. A chemical stench. A spiderweb tattoo. Details that couldn't be invented. Leo pressed on, his voice trembling, but every word sharp. I heard them whisper. "The package is ready for the 9 a.m. delivery. Everything will look like an accident on the Queensboro Bridge." The room seemed to drop in temperature. The Queensboro Bridge. The route he drove every Thursday morning to meet a discreet circle of investors, known only to the tightest inner ring. Inside Alistair's mind, a puzzle piece locked into place. An old rival of his, one who had once hired an underground syndicate, it's marked the spiderweb tattoo, so it was no childish fancy. This was the truth, laid bare in the gasping voice of a boy. Serafina sat beside her son, hands trembling. Fear crushed her chest, but when Leo whispered, "Mom taught me that staying silent when you see something wrong is also a crime," her heart felt pierced through. It was something she had once said during a blackout. When mother and son sat in their shabby apartment, lit only by flickering candles, she never imagined those words would turn her son into the most dangerous witness in the world of men in billion-dollar suits. Alistair leaned back, one hand trembling, something he had not allowed anyone to see in 30 years. A chill ran down his spine, not from the bomb, but from realizing the truth. His life had been dangling by a thread. And this child was the reason it had not snapped. There was no room left for doubt. He gave a signal. The door swung open. Entered not corporate security, but the private bomb squad he trusted. The kind trained in shadows where only right and wrong existed. No compromises. No words were spoken. They rushed into the garage. A minesweeping robot rolled across the concrete, its laser scanning each inch beneath the Maybach. Sweat broke across Seraphine's temple, though the room was freezing. Leo bit his lip, eyes wide, as if willing himself to track every heartbeat of the invisible bomb. Then the static crackle of the radio cut the silence. "Device located. Confirmed. C4. Linked to the car's GPS. Time to detonate at 50 miles per hour, if undetected." The car would explode the moment it crossed the bridge. A dead man's minute passed. The commander pulled off his mask, face pale. "Mr. Finch, the fact you're alive is a miracle. 30 more seconds and we'd have been too late." The words fell heavy as stone from the peak of a tower. Executives standing outside the garage blanched, eyes darting to the boy. Their earlier contempt curdled into fear, then awe. They whispered as if speaking of a supernatural omen. The boy had seen death they themselves had missed. Marcus Thorne, lingering among them, forced a smile, but his lips trembled, sweat soaking his collar. A first crack in his cold mask. Alistair did not turn to the board. Instead, he dropped to one knee before Leo. The gesture exploded in shock across every gaze. The most powerful man on Wall Street, who had never bowed to anyone, now lowered himself. Before a 12-year-old boy. What's your name? His voice was hoarse. Leo Washington, sir. Alistair looked deep into the boy's dark eyes and found not innocence, but a light money could never buy the light of truth. He turned to the mother, whose calloused hands had gripped a mop for 15 years. Mrs. Washington, his voice came low and steady. Your son is not just brave. He's an invaluable asset, and I need the help of both of you. This war has only begun. Serafina could not believe her ears. For a moment she saw her late husband, the man killed in a construction accident, leaving her adrift to raise their son alone. That death had once taught her, the poor are nothing but shadows. But now, before her, CEO Finch, the symbol of an empire, was calling her son invaluable. Leo looked at his mother, then back at Alistair. He did not smile, did not cheer, like a child basking in praise. He only nodded, like a soldier receiving orders. And in eyes still shadowed by fear, a spark of resolve ignited, and Alistair Finch knew his life had entered a new chapter. One where survival no longer depended on power, but on the courage of a boy who had once been invisible. The mirrored elevator shot upward through the steel heart of Finch Global, reflecting three figures who were never meant to stand together. Cold neon light washed over the face of Alistair Finch, the man used to commanding the world, now silent, his eyes shifting at times toward the slight boy and the trembling woman beside him. When the doors opened, they stepped into the space. Serafina had only ever dared to scrub in silence, the CEO's penthouse office. A wall of glass devoured the Manhattan skyline, glittering in the night. The high ceiling dripped with crystal chandeliers like a private universe for the wealthy. To Serafina, everything felt both strange and crushing. This place had once been an unreachable peak, now suddenly transformed into her battlefield. Alistair did not sit in the leather chair behind the ebony desk as usual. He leaned against him, arms folded. His voice rang steady, no longer cold, but like that of a general recruiting soldiers. Marcus thinks I'll call the FBI, give him time to erase the trail. But I don't play by his rules. We'll be taken down in the very world he craves, the boardroom. To do that, I need the eyes he never sees, the ears he believes don't exist. Serafina froze. For 15 years, she had existed like a shadow, pushing her mop down endless corridors no one bothered to glance at. Now that shadow had been renamed. Weapon Leo gripped a worn notebook, pulling it out and placing it on the desk. The pages were dense with tiny writing, strokes of pen surprisingly firm for a 12-year-old. I've written a lot, Leo said, his voice trembling but his eyes resolute. I wait for Mom after her shift, so I sit in the halls. Adults don't notice, but I see. Alistair flipped the pages. Each line was a puzzle piece. Security guards' comings and goings. Blind spots in the cameras, Wi-Fi passwords carelessly scrawled on whiteboards. Marcus's odd disappearances from his office. Tuesday, 3 a.m., service elevator. Leo pointed. Every week Mr. Thorne goes to the garage, but it's not on the schedule. Nobody asks. Serafina inhaled, her thin fingers clenching. She added her voice, each word carrying the weight of 15 years lived in darkness. I know which alarms have been broken for years and never repaired. I know which IT staff were forced to grant extra access. And Mr. Thorne, he has a personal shredder, not the kind the company issues. I have to clean the ashes every week. Alistair nodded faintly. Each detail of theirs was like a small blade carving into Marcus's proud facade. Ghosts in the tower, he murmured. Ouch. It will be the invisible who rip his mask apart. That night, a covert operation began. No alarms, no flashing red lights, only soft footfalls in long corridors, the hush of doors sliding open and pounding heartbeats. Serafina used her access card to bypass areas meant only for cleaning. Leo, with a memory like stone, guided, this camera has a blind spot. Hug the wall. The backup server is in the storage room on the 27th floor. Nobody notices because they think it's abandoned. They reached it. Streams of data poured across screens like a flood, cold but filled with secrets of survival. From the digital ruins, they recovered encrypted emails to a rival company. Paired with transfers funneled into a Cayman Islands account, and then the recording Marcus's voice, smooth as ever, but now laced with poison. After the accident, I'll push the merger through. The board won't have a choice. The Finch empire will be mine. In the small server room, bathed in blue light, Seraphine's hand trembled as she laid it on her son's shoulder. She couldn't believe it. The two of them, once only shadows on service stairwells, now held the key to toppling a giant. By dawn, as Manhattan glowed gold, they sat back in the penthouse. Evidence spread across the desk like weapons, emails, transfers. In security footage where Leo had pointed out the spiderweb tattoo, Alistair looked at the mother and son. In his eyes, they were no longer the janitor or the poor boy. They were comrades who had crossed a night of life and death by his side. He leaned back, a cold smile flickering. At noon, Marcus will summon the board. He plans to hint that I've lost my sanity. But he's just built the stage for his own execution. Sunlight struck the glass, spilling across the faces of three people. Steel King, a ghost once invisible, and a boy witness. Lives that. Never should have touched, now fused into a single spear, aimed at the heart of a traitor. The 80th floor boardroom of Finch Global blazed like a theater of power. Mahogany table stretched for dozens of feet, reflecting the faces of Wall Street's most formidable figures. Glossy brown leather chairs gleamed, and crystal glasses sparkled beneath ceiling lights. On the wall, a massive screen displayed financial graphs and the words Security and Leadership Transition Confidential. Marcus Thorne stood at the head of the table, his navy suit clanging like armor. His smile was sharp as a blade, his voice smooth as velvet, yet dripping poison into the ears of every board member. Ladies and gentlemen, the external threats force us to act. This empire cannot rest on a man who is weary and exhausted. We need a decisive transfer of leadership. The scattered tap of pens echoed. Some faces nodded, others held silent, eyes calculating. News cameras invited by Marcus himself recorded every frame. This was the coronation he had engineered. Then the heavy wooden doors swung open. Hinge groaned like a sword unsheathed. Alistair Finch walked in. Not hurried, not theatrical. He wore a charcoal suit, a simple dark tie, his gaze cold as midnight frost. Behind him, Serafina Washington and her son Leo. The room froze. Heads turned in unison like synchronized cameras. No one could believe the sight. CEO Finch, rumored to have retreated into shadow. Appearing with a janitor and her frail son, Marcus's face paled for a flicker before composure returned. His smile widened, as if he himself had summoned Alistair. Alistair, delighted to see you well. We were just discussing your betrayal, Marcus. Alistair's voice cut through, echoing, cold as a blade striking the table. He did not look at Marcus, but straight into the board member's eyes. Marcus faltered a beat. Sweat beaded at his temple, but he swallowed quickly, his voice gliding. I fear you've been misled. These accusations. Alistair raised his hand. The massive screen behind Marcus flared. The charts vanished. In their place, encrypted emails surfaced, each line cold and damning. Then a familiar voice poured from the Bose speakers. After the accident, I'll push the merger through. The board will have no other choice. The words fell like a sledgehammer. Marcus's face drained. His shout cracked the silence. Forgery lies. But Alistair did not move.
Alistair!
Did not move. He signaled. Again, the screen shifted to Cayman Islands bank accounts, transfers flowing steadily from a shell company. Then came security footage, his private elevator at 3 a.m., Marcus entering with two men. The image was grainy, but the spider web tattoo on one wrist burned clear. The room erupted with whispers. Cameras zoomed in, flashes strobed, faces once. Loyal to Marcus now recoiled in horror. He tried to steady himself, forcing a sneer. Blurry footage proves nothing, but then Leo stepped forward. His voice rang out, innocent yet piercing as an arrow. I saw him myself, night after night. The man with the tattoo went with Mr. Thorne. They talked about the explosion on Queensboro Bridge. Every lens turned to the boy. A chilling silence descended. In that instant, the testimony of a child shattered every shield Marcus had. Built, his face twisted, no longer the polished vice chairman, but a beast cornered. He roared, stabbing a finger at Leo. All because of this filthy brat. You should have rotted in your slum. The words hissed through his teeth, but their echo was a self-signed verdict. The veneer of civility cracked, revealing raw cruelty, arrogance, and prejudice. Alistair stepped forward, his voice deep. Resonant, no longer just a CEO speaking, but morality itself. No, Marcus. You forgot that in this tower, there are people, not shadows. You were defeated not by power or wealth, but by the courage of a boy you deemed worthless, and the dignity of a woman you never bothered to see. At that moment, the doors burst. Open again. Black windbreakers stamped with bold white FBI letters flooded in. An agent read out, voice sharp as steel, Marcus Thorne. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, and corporate treason. The clink of handcuffs snapped shut, dry and final, like a coffin lid sealing. Camera zoomed in on Marcus's face as he was slammed against the table. His eyes spat fire, but it was the fire of a man exposed, stripped, powerless to burn anyone. Else, he growled, but the only sound that remained was the rattle of chains. In the room drenched with Manhattan's light, the truth had been laid bare. Justice had found its voice. The cold, metallic echo of handcuffs still lingered as Marcus Thorne was escorted out of the boardroom. No shouting, no excuses only. The weight of a man who once stood atop power, now reduced to a prisoner. He turned his head, eyes blazing with hatred. But that gaze wasn't for Alistair. It was aimed at the thin boy standing behind him, Leo Washington. In that instant, the truth was undeniable. An empire had been shaken not by a rival conglomerate, by the clear eyes of a child he once dismissed as trash. The room sank into silence. Board members, men and women fluent only in the language of profits and numbers, sat frozen, forced to confront what they had long forgotten, humanity. Alistair Finch stood tall, his shadow stretching across the deep green carpet, his voice steady, heavy but luminous. Ladies and gentlemen, Finch Global nearly died today, not from a bomb but from rot within. Rot and born of the belief that some lives matter more than others. That false belief nearly turned this company to ashes. He turned to Serafina. The small black woman stood beside her son, eyes still red but steady with pride. Alistair placed a hand on her shoulder, gesture that drew a collective breath from the room. I present to you Mrs. Serafina Washington. For 15 years, she has walked every corridor of this tower, witnessing all that we ignored. From this day forward, she will serve as Director of Internal Security and Corporate Culture. Her knowledge is not written in textbooks, but etched in sweat and patience, and that is worth more to Finch Global than any MBA. Serafina was stunned. She had never dreamed her name would echo in this room, let alone with such a title. Her eyes blurred with tears, but her chin lifted high, carrying the dignity she had hidden all her life. Alistair turned to Leo. He looked at the boy as though seeing a reflection of a long-buried part of his own soul. Here his voice cracked but rang with strength. Is Leo Washington. A boy who taught me a lesson worth more than any deal. Finch Global will establish the Washington Vision Scholarship Fund with $50 million. To nurture overlooked young talents, the eyes that see what adults refuse to. Murmurs rippled through the room, not with doubt, but with astonishment. Some board members lowered their heads, not in the name of profit, but out of shame that a child was honored for courage they themselves lacked. Camera zoomed in. The image of Serafina and Leo standing beside CEO Finch would air on prime time, etched into the public's mind. For the first time, Finch Global would not be mentioned for its staggering numbers, but for a story of justice and dignity. As the meeting ended, the crowd dispersed. Only 3 figures remained in the room, bathed in the gold of sunset: Alistair, Serafina, and Leo. Alistair turned toward the glass wall, where the Manhattan skyline stretched like a canvas. For years, he had seen the city as a balance sheet. Skyscrapers as assets, lights as profits. But today, for the first time, he saw it differently. A place of people, small souls carrying unexpected flames. He turned back, eyes meeting Seraphine's. No longer CEO and janitor, only a man indebted to a woman. Thank you, he said, simple words weighted with a lifetime. Serafina nodded, eyes brimming, her voice trembling yet firm. Mr. Finch, make sure you're worthy of my son's sacrifice. Alistair stood silent, accepting it as a moral verdict. Then he bent to Leo. What do you want to be when you grow up, Leo? The boy turned, gaze drifting through the glass to where far. Below, janitors began their night shift. His voice was young, but each word carried the weight of hard-earned truth. I want to build things everyone can see, and protect the people no one notices. The words fell into the room, resonating like an oath. Alistair Finch nodded, a true smile, warm, rare, spreading across his once-armored face. He understood. His empire had not fallen today. It had been reborn. And this time, its foundation was not steel or concrete, but the courage of an invisible child and the unyielding dignity of a mother. Sunset draped the room, painting the silhouettes of three people standing shoulder to shoulder. An empire, a legacy, and a future. The legacy of truth. Sometimes what can change an empire is not power or wealth, but the clear eyes of a child brave enough to speak it. Leo had saved a life, but he had also saved the soul of a man who had forgotten what justice meant. And you, if you witness wrongdoing, would you stay silent or stand tall like Leo Washington? Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the stories that touch the heart.